What's going on, guys? So today we're just going to jump right into this. I'm going to give you everything you need to know to safely catch and release giant alligator gar. My channel is proof that these methods work. I have spent a lot of time catching a lot of giant gar. So without further ado, we are going to start with the rods. Now, rods are, in my opinion, one of the most important things to put a lot of thought into when it comes to alligator gar fishing, and that is because alligator gar, unlike 99% of fish, will sit with that bait in their mouth for sometimes a minute or more before you can set the hook, because their mouth is made entirely of bone. So you have to have a rod that's not only the right length, but strong enough to get a proper hook set regardless of where that fish is going. A lot of times in my videos and where I fish, the water's completely still. So that line will be making a curve around a swamp or a canal or whatever, and the fish will be way down the canal. And if your rod isn't long enough to pull that line up over the water column and get a hook set that's going straight to that fish's mouth, you're gonna lose the fish. But you don't want a rod that's too long to where when you set the hook, you're losing momentum on that hook set and it's going into the rod instead of that fish's mouth, right? So I stick with 7'6" to 7'10", maybe 8-foot rods. Okay, and that is because it's long enough to where you can get that line up if that fish is running far, but it's strong enough to where it's a beefy hook set and you can put all you got into that hook set, right? So I've been sticking with now probably 3 years the Denali bottom feeders, and these are 7'10" heavy action. I actually have 4 of these, and these rods are just incredible, man. I'm not sponsored or anything, but I will die using these probably. I don't see myself switching anytime soon. But I don't know. They have treated me very well. I've caught 4 7-footers in my life. I think 3 of them were on these rods, and I've caught multiple 6'10" pluses. So, and I'll show you all my hook sets now, proving how strong these rods are.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh!
They're like $60. They're catfish rods. And I customized them a little bit. I got some rod grips and duct tape on it and whatnot. But the reason I love these rods so much is they're long enough to where you can get a good hook set and minimize the slack when there's a fish running really far away. And it's still beefy enough to set the ever-living crap out of that hook set, right? I mean, these things aren't gonna break. And I know there's a lot of other good brands. There's those Hellcat rods, there's Akuma catfish rods, there's Ugly Stick Big Waters. I've caught a lot of big gar, Ugly Stick Big Waters. Just me personally, this is my favorite rod. I advise to stay in between the 7'6" to 8-foot range. That's my opinion based on me fishing in an area where there's mostly still water. Now, if you're in Texas and you're fishing rivers, strong rivers, that fish is only swimming away from you, you can get away with a shorter rod. You're not having to pick up a lot of line over an entire lagoon in a swamp, right? And the water's dead still. This is more specific to me in Louisiana, but I think if you're gonna hook into a gar and it potentially could be 7 to 8 footer, you're gonna want a bigger rod. Now, with that being said, I know I mentioned the gar like to pick up the bait and run with it, and sometimes they don't eat for a while. That's when having the right reel comes into play, and this is one of the most important aspects of gar fishing. All of them are important, but this is huge, is having a reel that has a bait clicker or live liner with very low tension. Now that meaning the line's gonna pull out of your reel and you're gonna hear it, but you want the fish to be able to pull that line out easily without feeling too much tension, because gar are very finicky, and once they feel that tension, they'll drop the bait, especially if you're fishing in still water like me. I think river fish over in Texas, they may be able to get away with more. Like I see people using lead weights over there. You can't really do that here. Those fish will drop it. But you wanna have a live liner or bait clicker. Now, bait clickers are on conventional reels. So I have the Abu Garcia here, and then I also have a pin squall here. Now, this bait clicker is a little louder and it takes a little more tension to pull that line out. So if I hear a fish running with that Abu, I know I have a few seconds to get to the reel. If I hear a fish running with this, the first thing I do is run over this reel and turn off that bait clicker and let it go into free spool to let that fish run. Now, I let the fish run probably about 30 seconds to 50 seconds. That's just me. That's your bait clickers. Now, if you were to be using a spinning reel, this would be called a live liner. So you would have to look for a spinning reel that has an LL at the end of it, or live liner. And that's the same thing. but it's this button on the back, right? So you open that, same thing. And that's just to let you know when you got a fish. Me personally, and what I've always done is as soon as I hear that on any reel is I open that bail or I turn off that clicker so they can have the free spool and not feel any tension. Now, I have gotten away in the past with using regular spinning reels and just doing this, turning the drag all the way down. That's a lot of work. I don't suggest that, but you can do it. I've caught some huge fish doing it. It's just easier with the live liner. Anyways, on to the line. I've used 4 different brands, I'd say, over the past 4 years. And I now am sticking only with a 130-pound test Suffix. That is the only line I've been using for a year. I started with Power Pro, like everybody else, and it was good, but it was expensive, and the coating wasn't the best. And it was really rough going through the guides. I caught my first 7-footer on it. I'm not complaining. But I wanted to step it up because I noticed it did get frayed easily. We have a lot of rocks and rebar around here. I'm in Louisiana. I know the guys in Texas have a lot of trees on the bottom. I used that for a while. I used another brand for a long time, 100-pound test. I always stuck between 80 and 100 for a while. But I noticed after switching to 130, I mean, truly it is a game changer. The thing with Alligator Gar is you're not gonna let a fish run long enough to pull out all your line, regardless of your reel, unless you're using like a tiny little bait caster, which is not smart. So don't worry about your line being too thick. You don't want to have a fish run so long that it takes all the line off your reel. So don't be afraid to beef up your line. That being said, this is still equivalent to like maybe 110-pound test Power Pro. It's very thin for its size, and I have yet to break off on a fish. The most I'll do is take off a few feet if I get snagged on a rock or something and there's a bit of fraying. I think having thick line is super important for Alligator Gar, mainly for the hook sets. For me personally, dude, I set the hook so freaking hard, I'm shocked it doesn't break. But yeah, so just to reiterate what we've gone over, rods 7.6 to 7.10, heavy action or extra heavy. Super strong hook set, that's the most important part. And reels, either conventional reel or spinning reel, live liner or bait clicker, you gotta have something that will notify you when the fish is pulling, and then when that fish starts pulling, turn it off. You don't want there to be tension. Line, you can't go too heavy. Unless you're getting like 300-pound test, dude, you'll be fine. Especially with conventional reels. These reels hold probably 250 yards of 25-pound mono. That's a lot of line when it's in braid. That's probably equivalent to this right here. And it's this 130-pound test. So that's still a lot of line. You don't want that fish to run so far to where you don't have line left. I've even seen guys use the big bait casting reels, those big musky looking reels. Those work too. You can still fit a lot of 100-pound braid on there. Me personally, I don't want to lose a fish that could be potentially 8 feet long due to the line snapping. That's just me. And it's not necessarily the fight itself that is a risk. It's the hook set and the runs that the fish will make sporadically. So we'll get into that in a second. But on to the rigs. This is a very finicky subject in alligator gar fishing, is the hooks and the terminal tackle, mostly the hooks. But I'm gonna go through what I've been using for 4 years now, and what I have found is the best method for catching and releasing alligator gar and having them swim off safely without harm. And so first, we're just gonna get into the basics. So what I like to do is I actually use a slip float. I used to use pole floats that had a piece of lead at the bottom, but I found the mixture of using that pole float with lead and then having about 4 feet of a leader and then maybe like a carp head, the two mixes of those weights flinging through the air greatly reduced my casting distance. So once I went to this float, which is as light as a feather, I can cast double, literally. So I got these on Amazon, great floats. They're THK fish, slip floats, whatever you want to call them. All right, so what I have above this float is a little bead, and then I have maybe 15 feet of line. And then what we have here is a uni knot. Now this uni knot was made with rigging floss. That's one of the most important aspects to how I rig for gar. And I just took about 10 inches of rigging floss, tied a uni knot, cut the trim ends, and it's been on here for probably a couple months, so it's kind of frayed, but it's still stuck in place. Now the only reason that is there is to keep this float from going all the way up your line. The only reason we have this float is to see which direction the fish is going, but have it close enough to the fish to where when I set that hook, it's a direct hook set. I don't have any slack going left or right. It's straight to that fish. It's not so little line that the float's gonna get pulled under, but it's more than enough to have an accurate direction of where that fish is going. So my baits are on the bottom most of the time. Sometimes I'll fish them under the float. I'll move the rigging floss down, but 90% of the time I'm fishing on the bottom. So we have that bead to protect that float from going over that bobber stopper. And we have another bead going down to our knot. Now, the knot I tie, I personally have never seen anybody else tie it, I don't think. I will show you all exactly how I do it. All right, I don't know what this would be called, but it's similar to a uni knot, kind of. So I take the line and I put it through about a 200-pound test swivel. So we got our swivel below our pole float. We're gonna put our line through there once, and we're gonna go back through it. So we're gonna have our line going through the eye of the swivel twice, right? See that loop? Boom. And then what I tie is a uni knot above that, probably like 7 loops. I wet it, pull it, and now this is purely optional. It's kind of just me being paranoid at the idea of losing a giant fish, but I'll take that tag in and I'll go over the main line and down and around it twice, if that makes any sense. So what that does is basically it ties a reverse uni knot above the uni knot to really lock it in place. Like I said, I've never seen anybody else who does that. That's kind of just me being extra careful. Now, onto the leader. This is the leader I've been using for ever since I started like actually gar fishing. So I had been watching Henry with Catching Dinosaurs. Y'all make sure to check him out. He's like the founding father of alligator gar conservation in the fishing world. And he was using Jerry Brown 300-pound test hollow core for a gar leader. And I looked at it online. I was like, okay, that's a little expensive. So let me look on Amazon. And I found this brand called Dorisea. It's Dorisea. And it's called Extreme Braid by them. 550-pound test. It was less than 20 bucks. I've been using it since. But I remember I found it in like 2020. And I started using it and I loved it. I've lost 1 fish on it, 1. And that was my fault because I didn't put on a new leader after like 8 fish. But other than that, it is caught 4 7-footers, 3 to 4 6'10s, 6'9", 6'8", every other 6-foot measurement and below. I've caught just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of gar on this leader. It is tried and true. It's cheap. It's easy to cut. You're not crimping wire and all that. The thing about alligator gar is those fish will swallow the hook. It's just part of it, and I'll explain why in a moment once we talk about the hook we're using. But it is important to me to have a leader that's not going to be in the way of that fish's ability to eat or rust in its throat or anything. And I mean, this is literally just like floss. It's just black string. So I think that's good for the fish, as well as not being too much for the fish to be picky to eat, if that makes sense. Like if you have a big steel leader, I feel like, at least in our waters in Louisiana that are dead still, that fish might be able to catch onto that easier unless you're fishing like a strong river where they might be used to current and stuff going on. But that's what I use. Love it. It's easy. It's quick to tie. And I do a uni knot on the hook as well as the swivel with it. And I do about 3.5 feet. But that's what I like, man. Perfect leader, cheap. I am proof that it works. Absolute giant fish have been caught on it. Now, on to the hook. So, hooks are a massive topic in the alligator gar fishing world. And what I've been using since I really started fishing for them a lot is 1/0 live bait hooks. I started with these H2O Express hooks. I caught a fish that was upwards of 7 feet on it. I caught my first 7-footer on it. So many giant fish were caught on those hooks. Now, I will say, now I set my drag a lot tighter and I set the hook a lot harder than when I was using those hooks, because now I use Owner Gorilla heavy duty live bait hooks. This is the hook that I use. It is, I think, a pack of 34 for like $28 on Amazon. Good deal. They will not bend on a fish. You can set the hook as hard as you can. It will not bend on a fish. If it does, something ain't right, you know. But That is the hook that I've been sticking with for over a year now, and it has allowed me to put pressure on fish that I wasn't able to do before. It is truly like a tuna hook at the end of the day, and it's just incredible. I love that hook, and I probably will never switch. But the reason I use the one-out live bait hooks is to prevent the fish from being harmed if the hook is swallowed. Now, a lot of people used to use treble hooks for alligator gar, like, you know, on the early days of alligator gar videos on YouTube in the 2010s. Like, I remember being like 12 in 2013 and watching whoever it was, that gar guide in Texas, and he was saying like 4/0 bronze treble hooks. And eventually I caught a gar on a bronze treble hook, and it was big, and it swallowed it, and I hated that. And for me personally, I grew up catching fish on a bayou that I basically had to myself, and nothing to me was a trash fish, nothing to me was a game fish. It was all fish. I call it bowfin, buffalo, sac-a-lait, bass, catfish, gar, mullet, everything. And I've been trying to catch a big gar like since I was a kid, and I finally caught one, and I was like, dude, what the hell, you know, like that's not what I wanted. I didn't even think about that. So I eventually, over a span of time, saw catching dinosaurs method, which is the small live bait hook method, and it seemed like the best conservation-minded method. I still think it is. A lot of people use treble hooks. If you can set the hook on a fish using a treble hook and hook it in the mouth every time, go for it. But I feel like if a fish were to swallow a treble hook, it probably doesn't have that good of a chance of survival. That being because, say a fish swallows a single hook, it's on one side of the throat, food can still pass. If a fish swallows a treble hook, especially a decent sized one, it could close the throat and food will not be able to pass. The argument is that the stomach acid can dissolve the hook, but if the hook doesn't make it to the stomach, it could be a problem. It probably is a problem. I'm not judging anyone for the hooks they use. I know people that use treble hooks. I just do my thing. I'm just saying the method that I think is the best for keeping the fish alive if you plan to release it. And I urge all of you guys to release any alligator gar you catch, because not only are their numbers decreasing, especially where I live because of bow fishing, but we've seen over the years they've been extirpated from a lot of their native range. So my thing is, I just want them to be around, you know? We got this massive fish, second largest freshwater fish in the US, right in our backyards. Why in the world would you just go kill it, you know? So I'm gonna first show you, actually, with an actual alligator gar skull, how these fish get hooked. And then I'm gonna show you the rigging method that I use. So I actually found this gar, I think on the Mississippi River. Yeah, I think I found this one on the river, and I got two more back there. I found one on the lake, and then I caught one like 4 or 5 years ago, with a treble hook, and it died. So I kept the skull. So what I'm gonna show you is how this fish works. So say you're new to alligator gar fishing, you don't know much about them. This fish is entirely made up of bone for the most part. You have in between the jaw, where his tongue is, a little pocket of flesh down here. That is very hard to hook. For some reason though, I find a really big gar, I've had a couple of them get hooked on the tongue, sometimes a little bit behind the tongue, not quite to the throat. But these fish, they'll bite the bait. Here's your gar, whatever. They usually, actually a gar this size probably wouldn't eat a bait this big, but let's just use it for measurement. So that fish is gonna pick up that bait and keep it like that and swim and try to get away from the other gar or whatever other fish you're trying to grab at the food in his mouth, whatever. So that fish is gonna pick it up and sit with it, either in place or they're gonna swim off. And they'll chomp it, they'll move it around, they'll, you know, figure out if they want to actually eat it. They'll start to swallow it. And the thing being is, alligator gar are really easy to hook in the throat, because the only reason is because it's really hard to hook them in the mouth. You can have tiny pockets of flesh on these, in between the teeth where the hook will get caught. I've had that a handful of times. 90% of the time, that hook is gonna be in the corner or behind the tongue. I rarely have fish actually swallow it, but it does happen, and that's why I use the small hooks. So that's why people say like gar fishing is so hard. It's because the odds of hooking that fish are low, and the odds of keeping that fish hooked are even lower, man. I can't tell you how many times they shake the hook. It's important to have a rig that is strong enough to last through the fight, and most importantly, find a spot on that fish's mouth where it can hook and stay pinned. On to the controversy of using small hooks. And I've used only small hooks for 4 years. So this is what you do. Rigging floss. off Amazon, cheap. You can use this or 30-pound braid, whatever you want. Loop, 2 overhand knots, 3-inch loop right there. You're gonna cut above that knot. And then what I do is I take a bigger hook or a rigging needle. You can do either one. I like to use a hook just because it's easy. And what I'll do is say this is a mullet right here. Pretend these hooks don't exist. You're gonna take your rigging floss in this hook, and it's really easy to get this down. It takes 5 seconds once you do it a couple times. It really is not a lot of work whatsoever. You take your rigging floss, and you're gonna put it through that fish wherever you want. I like to go above the eyes and under the skull. Some people like to do it through the lips. I find sometimes it'll pull and it'll rip the fish, but you're gonna take that hook and that rigging floss, and you're gonna pull one end of that rigging floss out the other side, right? So you have 2 loops, loop right there, loop right there. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna take that hook, you're gonna put it through one loop, and you're gonna put it through the other loop, just like that. This is where I notice people mess up with the one-eyed hooks. So, say, twist it, you go under, right? And your hook's that far from the bait, okay? And you cast it out and you catch fish and it's bleeding out of its gills. And you're like, why? It's a one-eyed hook, it shouldn't be making a fish bleed. The reason being is, say my hand is the fish's throat, okay? If this hook is this far away from that bait, that hook has a very high probability of hooking that fish's gills. You gotta think, this the fish's throat. This hook swings freely in whichever direction I'm setting that hook. It can go straight into a fish's gill. The gills are right next to the fish's throat, and if that hook is not onto that bait tight, that hook can go anywhere in that fish's mouth when you set the hook and penetrate a gill. That is the opposite of what we want, and I am only able to say that because when I first started gar fishing and I started using the rigging floss, that happened to me a lot. I mean, the fish didn't die. They were bleeding though, and it seems counterintuitive because you're using a small hook and the fish is bleeding more, and so the thing is all you have to do is twist it some more and go under until that hook is directly onto that bait. Like to where there is no space between that hook and that bait. That's what I've been doing for a few years now, and I have yet to have a problem. That's just my experience with it. I've seen firsthand what it's like to use the hooks away from the bait with the rigging floss, and I've seen what it's like to have the hook directly on the bait. The difference is astronomical. You're not going to gill hook a fish if you do it the way I just did, or it's gonna happen a lot less. Dude, I can't tell you how long it has been since I've gill hooked a fish. I literally put that hook so far on that bait, it's like pulling its skin up with the rigging floss. So say now this is fish's throat and this is the carp or whatever, and that fish has the bait in its throat, you set the hook, a lot of times that bait will pull out, and since your hook is right on that bait, it can catch the corner of the mouth or the pocket right by the corner of the mouth. I've had that happen so many times because I know a lot of times when a fish had actually swallowed it because I'll not know I had a fish, and then I'll set the hook and it'll be mouth hooked. I'm like, oh wait, my hook just saved me from throat hooking that fish. But a lot of times it does hook them in the throat. That's why I use the small hooks. All right, that was a big rant. Like I said, I'm just saying my experience with it. If you can catch and release a fish and either remove the hook or use a single hook, because you're not gonna remove the hook every time, it's just how it goes. That's all that matters. Summary of everything. Rod, you want your rod to be strong, not too long. You don't want to use a surf rod for gar, in my opinion. 7'6" to 7'10", 8 foot-ish. That's what I think is the best range for alligator gar. You want a heavy action or extra heavy action. Conventional reel or big spinning reel. Say if you're using a pin reel, I prefer 6,000 to 8,000 size. If you're using an Abu Garcia, I use 7,000. I'd say your line needs to be at the least 100-pound test, and that is because the hook set needs to be strong, like I said, as well as the ability to keep the fish pinned when they make runs or even when they jump. You never know what's gonna happen. So I'm done ranting for now. I hope you guys go catch some huge fish. Everybody's different, man. Everybody's different. I found for me, this is the best method to keep those gar alive and swimming, even after a strong fight. A lot of the fish I've caught are easily over 40 years old, and the last thing I'd want is for one of them to die. I've yet to have it happen, knock on wood. But hope y'all enjoyed this, guys, and now I'm going to show y'all a fish that I caught the other day right before sunset. I just went for like an hour and ended up catching a nice one, just to kind of further prove that this method is a good method. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of this one, and I will see you guys in the next fishing video. Just wanted to show you guys this real quick. If any of you guys follow the Fish Whisperer or Kyle, he just came up with a rig that he calls the Gar Saver rig. And it basically has an object like a straw or a little bit of PVC above a treble hook, which prevents the fish from swallowing the bait, but allows the angler to use a treble hook for better hookup ratio. I think it's super interesting. I, of course, use the small hooks for conservation purposes, but I'm totally open to trying new things that can help the fish get a safe release. And I think this is pretty cool. So I just wanted to show you guys this, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of this one.
Oh, big fish, guys. Big fish. Big fish, guys. Big fish. Come on. Stay on. He's on those pylons. Come on, get out of there. That's a big fish, guys. Way bigger than I was expecting. Don't jump, don't jump, don't jump. Don't jump. Come on. Don't jump. He feels so heavy, but I still can't tell how big he is. Oh yeah, nice fish, guys, nice fish. Nice fish, don't jump, don't jump. Oh, there he goes. Okay. Oh, that's a big fish, guys. There we go. That's a nice one. I don't want to pull him over the rocks if I don't have to, so I'm gonna bring him a little further. All right, guys. Check this fish out. Check that fish out, guys. Let's go. Let's go. I knew it was a big one when I set that hook, bro. $5'1.5". All right, guys. There's a big one right there. 5'1.5". Big fish. She's really fat. I knew when I set the hook, like I said, man, that was a big fish. Oh, that's big for a 5'1". She's super heavy. Super, super heavy. But we got her tagged, we got the fin sample. Let's go ahead and let this beast go see another day. See that wake right there, guys? That fish just came up and I saw the tag on its tail.